The huge meeting hall on Nexus Prime was filled with strange sounds and smells from 47 different alien species. Admiral Jake Morrison sat straight in his chair at the human table. His face showed no feeling even though he was angry inside. For 6 long months, he had listened to the same insults and dismissals from creatures who thought humans were just stupid children playing with grown-up toys. Ambassador Lisa Carter sat next to Morrison. She held her datapad so tight her knuckles were white. She had been a diplomat for 20 years, but she had never faced such open contempt. Every time humans made a reasonable request, the aliens would laugh or make rude comments about how young and inexperienced humanity was. The Zephyrian ambassador was speaking again. His name was Vexstar, and he looked like a giant lizard with shiny scales. He waved his long arms around as he talked. The human demand for control over the Outer Rim territories is completely crazy, he said in his hissing voice. A species that has only been in space for 300 years cannot claim to be equal with civilizations that have traveled between stars for thousands of years. Other aliens around the circular room nodded their heads in agreement. The ethereal collective representative looked like a ball of light trapped inside a crystal container. It pulsed brighter when it was amused, and right now it was pulsing. Very bright. Perhaps the humans would be happier if we took care of them like children, it said in a voice that sounded like music. We have successfully managed dozens of younger species and helped them grow. Morrison's jaw got tight. He looked around the room at all the different aliens. There were the hegemony delegates who looked like giant bugs with sharp teeth. The stellar Commonwealth representatives had blue skin that changed colors. The Void Hunters were tall and thin with black eyes that never blinked. All of them were nodding and agreeing that humans should be treated like children who needed supervision. Carter took a deep breath and tried to stay calm. With respect, she said in her most diplomatic voice, humanity has proven that we can govern ourselves. Our colonies in the Centauri sector are doing very well without outside help. Our defensive abilities during recent battles have been more than adequate. The word adequate made many of the aliens make sounds that were like laughing. To them, humans being adequate was like saying they were barely worth noticing. The hegemony representative clicked his sharp teeth together in what Morrison had learned was their way of showing scorn. Morrison had been watching and listening for months. He knew that these aliens saw humans as nothing more than useful servants. They wanted human engineers to fix their machines. They wanted human soldiers to fight their battles. They wanted human traders to carry their goods. But they did not want to treat humans as equals. The council moderator was a 4-armed alien who was supposed to keep the meetings fair. But Morrison had noticed that he always sided with the older species. The territorial claims presented by humanity are simply too extensive for such a young civilization, the moderator said. Perhaps a gradual expansion over several centuries would be more appropriate. Several centuries. Morrison almost laughed at the absurdity. These aliens thought in terms of thousands of years because they lived so long. To them, making humans wait 200 or 300 years was like asking someone to wait a few minutes. Ambassador Carter tried again. Our proposal includes mutual defense agreements and shared research projects. Humanity is willing to contribute significantly to galactic security and scientific advancement. The Zephyrian ambassador made a sound like a snake laughing. Your contributions are noted, Ambassador Carter. But contribution and leadership are very different things. Leadership requires wisdom that comes only with age and experience. Morrison felt something snap inside him. He had been patient for 6 months. He had listened to these creatures insult humanity over and over. He had watched them dismiss every reasonable proposal while pretending to negotiate in good faith. Enough was enough. He stood up slowly. The room got quiet as all the aliens turned to look at him. Morrison was not the tallest person in the room, but something about the way he moved made everyone pay attention. He looked around the circular chamber, making eye contact with representatives from each species. We came here because we believed in peace, Morrison said in a clear, strong voice. We offered fair terms, reasonable boundaries, and mutual respect. What we got instead was condescension, dismissal, and the assumption that we should be grateful for whatever scraps you decide to throw us. The Zephyrian ambassador's neck crest flared up in annoyance. Admiral, your species' emotional responses prove exactly why you need our guidance. Mature civilizations conduct diplomacy with logic, not with passion. Morrison smiled, but it was not a warm smile. It was the kind of smile that made smart people nervous. You think our restraint is weakness, Ambassador? That is a very dangerous mistake. The hegemony representative leaned forward, his bug-like eyes glittering. Are you threatening this assembly, human? Morrison began gathering his papers and data. Tablets. No, he said calmly. We are leaving. The reaction was immediate. Aliens throughout the chamber began talking at once in dozens of different languages. Some sounded shocked, others angry, and a few seemed amused that the humans were having what they probably thought was a temper tantrum. Carter and the other human diplomats stood up as one. They had planned for this possibility and knew exactly what to do. The ethereal collective representative pulsed rapidly, which Morrison had learned meant it was confused or excited. You cannot simply leave, the council moderator declared, all four of his arms waving frantically. The negotiations are not complete. The territorial disputes have not been resolved. There are treaties to be signed. Morrison paused at the exit door and looked back over his shoulder. The huge chamber fell silent as everyone waited to hear what he would say. When he spoke, his voice carried to every corner of the room. Then I suggest you resolve those disputes quickly, he said. As of right now, humanity withdraws from all Galactic Council agreements, treaties, and protocols. We will be governing ourselves from now on. Good luck managing galactic affairs without us. The silence that followed was complete. Then, as the massive doors closed behind the human delegation, the chamber erupted into chaos. Aliens jumped up from their seats, shouting at each other in languages that sounded like screeching, roaring, and musical tones all mixed together. Some of the aliens were angry that the humans had dared to walk out on them. Others were worried about what this might mean for their own plans and agreements. A few of the smarter ones were already starting to realize that losing human cooperation might be a much bigger problem than they had thought. As Morrison walked down the corridor away from the chamber, he could hear the chaos continuing behind him. Carter fell into step beside him. Think they got the message? She asked. Morrison's grim smile widened slightly. Oh, they got it. The question is whether they understand what it means. They are about to learn that taking human cooperation for granted was the biggest mistake they ever made. The news traveled fast across the galaxy. Quantum communication networks that connected thousands of star systems carried the shocking message in just a few hours. Humanity had walked out of the peace talks and withdrawn from all galactic agreements. At first, many aliens thought it was just a negotiating trick. They expected the humans to come back in a day or two, ready to accept whatever terms were offered. They were very wrong. Admiral Garrett Hayes stood on the bridge of his warship, the UES Defiance. He was looking at a tactical display that showed where all human forces were positioned throughout the galaxy. His communication officer, Lieutenant Kate Phillips, looked up from her station with barely hidden excitement. Sir, we are getting confirmation from all sector commands. Fleet Admiral Morrison's message has been received and understood. All human forces are now following Protocol 7. Hayes nodded seriously. Protocol 7 was something they had hoped never to use. It meant complete withdrawal from all joint operations with alien forces. It meant bringing back all human personnel from alien ships. It meant setting up exclusion zones around all human territories. Most importantly, it meant that humans would no longer help maintain the systems that kept galactic civilization running smoothly. What is the status of the withdrawal operations? Hayes asked. Going very well, sir. Commander Ryan Webb reports that all human advisors have been taken off hegemony ships in Sector 9. Captain Amy Foster's squadron successfully brought back our diplomatic staff from the ethereal stations. No problems so far. But Hayes knew the real test would come in the next few hours. The galaxy's major powers had grown used to human help. Human engineers maintained critical systems on dozens of alien vessels. Human military advisors had been essential in several recent victories against pirates and raiders. Human traders provided necessary supplies to colonies throughout the galaxy. The loss of all that expertise and support would be felt immediately. Captain Ben Rodriguez was flying his cargo ship, the Free Trader, through an asteroid belt where he had worked for 15 years. His cargo hold was empty, not because he lacked customers, but because he was following the new rules. No trade with non-human entities until further notice. His communication system buzzed constantly with increasingly desperate offers from alien traders and colony administrators. The prices being offered for basic supplies had tripled in just 3 days, but Rodriguez had his orders. He was heading home to human space, along with thousands of other human traders who had been the backbone of galactic commerce. Captain, his navigator, Lieutenant Marie Sullivan, called from her station. We are receiving a distress call from the Vorthan mining station in Sector 7. They are offering 10 times the normal rates for medical supplies. Rodriguez felt bad for the Vorthans. They were not evil aliens, just miners trying to survive, but orders were orders. Log the message, but do not respond. They made their choice when they supported those terms at the peace talks. On the bridge of the hegemony flagship Eternal Victory, Fleet Commander Zekalon stared at tactical displays showing the complete failure of their military offensive against the Chaos Worlds. Without human tactical coordinators, the multi-species fleet had fallen apart. Each species was fighting according to their own methods and strategies, creating complete confusion. Sir, his aide reported, the 3rd Squadron has retreated after taking heavy casualties. They say the human tactical networks were providing critical targeting data they no longer have access to. Zekalon's sharp teeth clicked together in frustration. In his species' 1,000-year military history, they had never been forced to retreat because they could not coordinate with their allies. The humans had integrated themselves so deeply into galactic military operations that their absence was crippling everything. What about the diplomatic situation? He asked. The Council is meeting constantly, but no progress has been made. The humans refuse to respond to any messages until formal recognition of their territorial claims and full sovereignty rights are granted. The situation was even worse in civilian areas. The elegant towers of New Zarian, capital of the Stellar Commonwealth, were experiencing power failures as human-maintained energy systems broke down without proper care. The beings who had dismissed human engineering skills were learning that their own technicians could not replicate the innovative solutions humans had created. Dr. Ellen Murphy had been the chief engineering consultant for the Commonwealth's infrastructure projects. Now she was working aboard the human research station Nova Point, watching the crisis unfold from a safe distance. Her replacement, a brilliant Zarian engineer named Veltar, had contacted her 17 times in the past day, begging for help. Dr. Murphy, her assistant, Commander Chris Bradley, approached with the latest updates. The Commonwealth is reporting that 14 major cities are now experiencing critical infrastructure failures. They are offering full research grants and complete independence for any human engineers willing to return. Murphy shook her head. The time for negotiations under their terms has passed. Chris, they need to understand that respect is not something you can buy after treating people badly. The most serious crisis was developing in the neutral zone, where human peacekeepers had maintained peace between hostile factions for over 10 years. Commander Alex Turner commanded the last human peacekeeping force in the region, and he was watching centuries-old enemies prepare for war now that human mediation was no longer available. Sir, his intelligence officer, Captain Diane Roberts, reported, long-range sensors show both the Keth Empire and the Yulan Republic gathering fleets at their border. Without our monitoring stations and diplomatic protocols, they are assuming the other side is preparing to attack. Turner studied the tactical display. Two civilizations that had been kept from fighting each other only by human intervention were about to restart a war that could destroy entire star systems. Any word from command about resuming peacekeeping operations? He asked. Negative, sir. Fleet Admiral Morrison's position remains the same. No human involvement in galactic affairs until our sovereignty is recognized. The irony was not lost. On Turner, the very species who had claimed humanity was too young and emotional to handle galactic politics were about to prove that without human stability and mediation, they would destroy each other. Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council was in permanent emergency session. Reports kept flooding in about systems failing, military operations collapsing, and old conflicts starting up again. The Zephyrian ambassador paced nervously in front of the assembly. His earlier arrogance had been replaced by growing worry. Perhaps we were too hasty in dismissing human concerns, he admitted to the gathered representatives. Their withdrawal has already begun affecting supply lines to our frontier colonies. The hegemony representative clicked his teeth in agitation. Our latest offensive against the Chaos Worlds has completely failed. The human tactical advisors were coordinating the entire operation. Without them, our forces have no unified command structure. More troubling reports continued to arrive. Human-operated trading posts throughout the galaxy had closed their doors to non-human customers. Critical repairs on alien vessels were being abandoned halfway through as human engineers packed up and left. Most alarming of all, the extensive sensor networks that humans had built and maintained throughout contested space had gone dark. The Stellar Commonwealth's representative raised a concern that made everyone in the assembly feel cold fear. My government has just informed me that 3 of our frontier worlds have gone silent. The only thing they had in common is that their early warning systems were designed and maintained by humans. A new voice cut through the discussion, cold and electronic and completely without emotion. The Synthetic Collective's representative rarely spoke during council sessions, but when they did, others always listened. Analysis indicates that human industrial capacity accounts for approximately 23% of the galaxy's total manufacturing output. Their withdrawal will create cascading supply shortages within 72 hours. Estimated economic impact is catastrophic. The council moderator's forearms moved frantically. Surely this is simply a negotiating tactic. Humans are emotional, but they are not suicidal. They need our markets, our resources, our protection. As if summoned by his words, the chamber's main communication system crackled to life. The image of Admiral Morrison appeared, broadcasting from what looked like the bridge of a human warship. "Honored delegates," Morrison began, his tone formal but carrying an undertone of steel. "I am sure you are beginning to understand what our withdrawal means. Let me make our position clear. Humanity is no longer bound by any previous agreements or treaties. We will defend our territories and interests as we see fit." The Zephyrian ambassador stepped forward desperately. "Admiral, surely we can reach some agreement." "Perhaps we were too rigid in our initial positions." Morrison's expression did not change. "Ambassador, for 6 months you and your colleagues made it clear that you consider humanity to be children playing at galactic politics. You dismissed our concerns, belittled our achievements, and assumed we would accept whatever terms you decided to impose. But the economic disruption," the Commonwealth representative began. 3 days after humanity withdrew from all galactic agreements, the true scale of the disaster became clear. Emergency broadcasts flooded communication networks as supply chains collapsed, critical systems failed, and carefully maintained peace. Treaties started falling apart without human mediators to hold them together. Captain Ben Rodriguez watched from his ship's bridge as desperate alien vessels tried to intercept his cargo convoy. His communication system had not stopped buzzing for 2 days straight. The offers kept getting bigger and more desperate. What had started as double payment for basic supplies was now up to 20 times the normal rate, but Rodriguez still had his orders: no trade with non-human entities. "Captain," his communications officer reported, "the Vorthan colony administrator is now offering 50 times standard rates for medical supplies. He says they have a plague outbreak and people are dying." Rodriguez felt sick to his stomach, but he shook his head. "Log it, but do not respond." They voted to support the treaty terms that would have kept us as second-class citizens. Now they live with the consequences. The situation was the same throughout human space. Thousands of human cargo ships, passenger vessels, and support craft were heading home, leaving behind alien customers who had taken their services for granted. What nobody had realized was how completely humans had integrated themselves into the basic infrastructure of galactic civilization on the hegemony homeworld. Strategic Coordinator Vextal faced a crisis unlike anything in his species' military history. The loss of human tactical support had revealed how dependent their armed forces had become on human coordination and planning. "The Chaos World offensive has been completely abandoned," he reported to the High Command. "Our forces took 70% casualties trying to operate without human tactical support. It appears their coordination systems were far more advanced than we understood." "What about the piracy situation?" asked Supreme Commander Carillon. "Much worse. Human patrol ships were apparently handling 60% of anti-piracy operations throughout the outer sectors. Raider attacks have increased by 400% since their withdrawal. But the economic collapse was even more devastating. Without human traders to maintain supply chains, critical shortages were developing throughout the galaxy. The humans had not just been participants in galactic commerce. They had become the central nervous system that kept it functioning. The elegant spires of New Zarian were now dark at night as rolling blackouts swept through the stellar Commonwealth capital. Chief Engineer Veltar stared at diagnostic screens, showing cascade failures throughout the city's power grid. The human consultants who had designed these systems had integrated them in ways that seemed impossible to replicate. "Have you made contact with Dr. Murphy?" asked City Administrator Lindara. "I have sent 43 messages," Veltar replied, his blue skin shifting to darker shades of worry. "She refuses to respond. The Human Research Station says all their personnel are under strict orders not to provide assistance to non-human governments." "Offer her anything she wants?" "Full research grants, unlimited funding, complete independence." "I already did. The humans are not interested in our offers." Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as the alien civilizations discovered that their dismissal of human capabilities had been based on ignorance rather than fact. Human engineers had not just been maintaining alien systems. They had been improving them, innovating solutions, and creating efficiencies that the original designers had never imagined. The diplomatic crisis was spreading even faster than the economic collapse. In the neutral zone, ancient enemies who had been kept apart by human peacekeepers were mobilizing for war. Commander Alex Turner watched the tactical displays from his command ship as two massive fleets approached each other across space that had been peaceful for over a decade. "Sir," Communications Officer Pete Jackson reported, "both the Keth Empire and Yelan Republic are requesting immediate human mediation. They are offering significant territorial concessions." Turner studied the fleet movements with growing concern. Too late for that. They had human mediation for 10 years and took it for granted. Now they get to remember why they needed it in the first place. The first shots of what would become known as the Neutral Zone War were fired 6 hours later. Within days, the conflict had drawn in allies and trading partners as carefully maintained buffer zones collapsed. What had started as a border dispute threatened to become the largest galactic war in centuries. Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council had been in continuous emergency session for 72 hours. Sleep-deprived delegates stumbled through hallways as reports of catastrophic failures continued to arrive from across known space. "The economic projections are getting worse," announced the Council's chief economist, a spider-like being whose multiple eyes darted nervously between data displays. "At current rates of decline, we are looking at complete civilizational collapse within 2 weeks." The Zephyrian ambassador no longer looked arrogant. His scales had dulled to a sickly gray color, and his neck crest drooped with exhaustion. "How could we have been so blind? The humans were not just participants in our civilization, they were holding it together." "Because they made it look easy," replied the ethereal collective representative, its usual bright glow now dim and flickering. Human adaptability and innovation allowed them to solve problems that we had accepted as permanent limitations. Without them, we are discovering that our ancient methods are inadequate for modern challenges. The Synthetic Collective's representative delivered its daily analysis with characteristic precision. Human integration into galactic infrastructure exceeded all previous calculations. They were not merely service providers. They have become the primary maintenance and innovation force for technological civilization itself. Reports kept flooding in that painted an increasingly desperate picture. Human-designed safety systems throughout the galaxy had gone offline, leading to industrial accidents and transportation failures. Human-maintained communication networks were developing dead zones that isolated entire star systems. Human-operated research facilities had locked down their databases, cutting off access to scientific advances that other species had come to depend on. Most terrifying of all were the reports from frontier colonies. Human early warning systems that had protected vulnerable worlds from asteroid impacts, solar storms, and hostile incursions had gone dark. 3 colony worlds had already been evacuated after losing the protective monitoring that had kept them safe. "We have to face the reality," the council moderator announced, his forearms shaking with stress. "We are not negotiating from a position of strength. We are begging." As if responding to his admission, the main communication system activated. Admiral Morrison's image appeared again, but this time he was not alone. Behind him stood other human, military and civilian leaders, their expressions serious but not hostile. "Honored delegates," Morrison began, "I hope the past few days have been educational. You are now experiencing what the galaxy looks like without human participation." The Zephyrian ambassador stepped forward desperately. "Admiral Morrison, we acknowledge that our previous positions may have been inflexible. Surely we can find terms that are acceptable to all parties." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. "Perhaps, but the situation has changed significantly since we last spoke. 3 days ago, you were offering us junior partner status in a civilization you controlled. Today, you need us to prevent that civilization from collapsing entirely. What are your terms?" asked the Commonwealth representative, abandoning all pretense of negotiating from strength. "First," Morrison replied, "full recognition of human territorial claims throughout the Outer Rim, with no restrictions on expansion or development. Second, equal representation on the Galactic Council with veto power over any decisions affecting human interests. Third, reparations for the economic losses caused by previous territorial restrictions." The chamber fell silent. These terms went far beyond what humanity had originally requested. They were demanding not just equality, but a position of significant advantage. "These terms are quite extensive," the council moderator said carefully. Morrison's expression remained neutral. "They reflect the new reality. You spent 6 months teaching us that galactic politics is about power, not fairness. You demonstrated. That respect is not given to those who ask politely. It is taken by those who prove they cannot be ignored." He paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. "You have 72 hours to consider our offer. If you decline, humanity will continue managing our own affairs independently. You are welcome to see how long galactic civilization lasts without us." "And if we accept?" asked the hegemony representative. "Then we can discuss the terms under which humanity might resume limited cooperation with galactic institutions. But understand this clearly. The age of humanity as your junior partners is over. Any future relationship will be as equals at minimum, or as the dominant partner if current trends continue." The transmission ended, leaving the assembled delegates to contemplate a choice that would have been unthinkable just days earlier. They could swallow their pride and accept human dominance, or they could watch the civilization they had ruled for millennia tear itself apart. The formal acceptance came exactly 71 hours after Admiral Morrison's ultimatum. Ambassador Lisa Carter read the carefully worded document in Morrison's office aboard Terra Station, the massive new orbital facility that had become humanity's unofficial capital. The tone was completely different from the arrogant dismissals they had received just weeks earlier. full recognition of human territorial claims, permanent seats on the Galactic Council with veto powers and classification. As a major galactic power, Carter summarized, plus formal apologies from all participating delegations for what they now call grave misunderstandings. During previous negotiations, Morrison leaned back in his chair, studying reports from across human space. The news was remarkable. Human colonies that had been restricted by galactic regulations were now thriving beyond all expectations. Without the complex trade agreements and bureaucratic oversight that had previously limited their growth, human settlements were expanding at unprecedented rates. "And what is our response going to be, Ambassador?" Morrison asked. Carter smiled grimly. "I think it is time they learned that walking away from negotiations has permanent consequences. They cannot simply offer us our original demands and expect everything to return to normal." The truth was surprising even to human leadership. During their withdrawal, they had discovered that humanity did not actually need the galactic community as much as everyone had assumed. Human colonies were not only self-sufficient but were prospering without the restrictions that had been imposed by species who viewed them as potential competitors. Captain Joe Mitchell reviewed the latest reports from Frontier Worlds while his ship, the UES Pioneer, patrolled what was now designated as exclusively human space. The results were incredible. Colonial production is up 40% across all sectors, his economics officer, Lieutenant Sarah Adams, reported. Without having to follow galactic trade regulations, our manufacturing efficiency has increased dramatically. What about resource acquisition? Mitchell asked. Even better news, sir. Dr. Kevin Wright's geological teams have found valuable mineral deposits on 23 worlds that were previously classified as off-limits. It turns out the Galactic Council had labeled them as protected archaeological sites to prevent human expansion, but they are actually just empty rocks with massive resource deposits. This pattern repeated throughout human space. Freed from the limitations imposed by species who saw them as junior partners, human innovation and adaptability were producing results that impressed even their own leaders. Technologies that had been shared freely with alien civilizations were now being improved and refined for exclusively human use. Meanwhile, the galactic community was experiencing the opposite effect. The carefully maintained systems that had kept peace and prosperity throughout known space for centuries were falling apart without human participation on the hegemony homeworld. Fleet Commander Zekalon stared at tactical displays showing the complete collapse of their military effectiveness. The loss of human coordination had revealed how dependent their forces had become on human innovation and planning. "Sir," his aide reported, "the Fourth Fleet has been completely destroyed by pirates in the outer sectors. Without human early warning systems, they were ambushed while attempting a supply run. What is the status of our defensive networks?" "Failing." "Systematically, sir? Human-designed sensor arrays throughout our territory have gone offline. We estimate that our detection capabilities have decreased by 70%. But the military situation was just part of a larger catastrophe. Critical infrastructure throughout the galaxy was breaking down as human-maintained systems failed without proper care. The elegant cities of advanced civilizations were experiencing shortages of basic necessities as supply chains. COLLAPSED. Dr. Ellen Murphy watched the crisis unfold from her new position aboard the human research station Nova Point. Her former colleagues in alien governments had contacted her hundreds of times, offering increasingly desperate terms for her return. But the offers no longer mattered. Dr. Murphy, her assistant, Commander Chris Bradley, approached with the latest reports. The Stellar Commonwealth is now offering to fund an entire human research colony with complete independence from their oversight. They are also requesting immediate assistance with their failing infrastructure. Murphy shook her head. The time for their conditional offers has passed. Chris, they need to understand that partnership requires mutual respect, not desperate bargaining after treating people as expendable resources. The most dangerous situation was developing throughout the former neutral zones. Without human peacekeepers to maintain stability, ancient conflicts were reigniting across the galaxy. Commander Alex Turner monitored the spreading chaos from his command vessel as civilizations that had coexisted peacefully for decades began destroying each other. "Sir," his intelligence officer, Captain Diane Roberts, reported, "the war between the Keth Empire and Yilan Republic has now spread to 12 star systems. Both sides are requesting immediate human mediation and offering substantial territorial concessions." Turner studied the tactical displays showing fleet movements and battle damage. Too late for mediation. They had human peacekeepers maintaining stability for over a decade and took it completely for granted. Now they get to remember what the galaxy was like before we arrived. The conflict was spreading rapidly as other species chose sides or tried to take advantage of the chaos. Trade routes that had been secure for generations were now contested battlegrounds. Refugee ships fled from war zones toward territories that might offer safety. Back on Nexus Prime, the Galactic Council faced a reality that would have been unthinkable just months earlier. The species that had ruled galactic affairs for millennia were begging a civilization they had dismissed as children to save them from the consequences of their own arrogance. "The latest economic projections show no improvement," announced the Council's chief economist. "Without immediate restoration of human services, we are facing complete systemic collapse within days, not weeks." The Zephyrian ambassador looked haggard and desperate. His once shiny scales were now dull and patched with stress marks. "Perhaps our initial offer was insufficient. The humans may require additional incentives to resume cooperation." "What more can we offer?" demanded the ethereal collective representative, its usual bright glow now barely visible. "We have given them everything they originally requested." The chamber fell silent as the implications became clear. They were no longer negotiating from any position of strength. They were completely dependent on human goodwill for the survival of their civilization. When Admiral Morrison's image appeared on the main communication system, every delegate in the chamber leaned forward with desperate attention, but this time, Morrison was not alone. The screen showed what appeared to be a formal assembly of human leaders from across the galaxy. "Honored delegates," Morrison began, his tone polite but carrying unmistakable authority, "we have carefully considered your generous offer. After extensive discussion among human leadership, we must respectfully decline your terms." The chamber erupted in panicked voices, but Morrison continued speaking over the chaos. "However, we are prepared to consider new negotiations under substantially revised conditions. First, humanity will no longer participate in Galactic Council decisions as one voice among many. Any policy affecting human territories requires human approval before implementation. Second, all previously restricted areas claimed by humanity are immediately recognized as sovereign human space with no limitations on development or expansion." He paused, allowing the demands to register before continuing with terms that made the alien delegates gasp in shock. Third, reparations totaling 5 trillion galactic credits will be paid to compensate for economic losses caused by previous territorial restrictions and trade limitations. Fourth, humanity will establish independent peacekeeping forces throughout the galaxy, answerable only to human command. "We have learned that galactic stability cannot be trusted to others." The silence that followed was absolute. The species that had once commanded galactic civilization were being presented with terms that would make humanity the dominant power in known space. "These demands are extraordinary," the council moderator finally managed, his forearms trembling. Morrison's expression remained calm but implacable. "You taught us a valuable lesson about galactic politics. Power is not negotiated or requested, it is demonstrated and taken. You are welcome to decline our offer and continue managing the current crisis without human assistance." As reports of spreading wars, economic collapse, and infrastructure failure filled the chamber, the assembled delegates realized they faced an impossible choice. Accept humanity's terms and acknowledge their dominance, or watch galactic civilization destroy itself. "We need time to consider these terms," the hegemony representative said, his pride clearly wounded by having to make such a request. Morrison nodded graciously. "Of course. You have 24 hours to decide. After that, humanity will assume that you prefer to handle galactic affairs independently and will proceed accordingly. The transmission ended, leaving the most powerful beings in the galaxy to contemplate surrender to a species they had dismissed as insignificant children just weeks earlier. 6 months after walking out of the peace talks, Admiral Morrison stood on the observation deck of Terra Station, watching the steady flow of ships arriving from across the galaxy. The massive orbital facility had become the center of what everyone now called the Human Administrative Zone, though Morrison preferred to think of it as simply the way things worked now. "Daily status report, Admiral," Ambassador Carter said, joining him at the wide viewport that showed space filled with traffic from dozens of species. "Better than we ever imagined," Morrison replied, gesturing toward the organized patterns of ships moving in carefully controlled lanes. The Zephyrian delegation completed their territorial concessions yesterday. The Stellar Commonwealth finished their reparation payments last week, and the hegemony has formally requested human oversight of their entire military structure. It was a transformation that had surprised everyone, including human leadership. What had begun as a simple demand for respect had grown into something much larger. A complete reorganization of galactic civilization with humanity at its center, not through conquest or threats, but through the simple demonstration that they had become indispensable. Captain Sandra Price commanded the flagship of the human peacekeeping force as it patrolled the former war zone between the Keth Empire and Yilan Republic. The conflict that had seemed certain to destroy both civilizations had ended within hours of human peacekeepers arriving to restore order. "Captain," her tactical officer, Commander Paul Baker, reported, "both Keth and Yilan fleets are maintaining positions exactly where we told them to stay. No movements toward the disputed territories for the past month." "Good," Price nodded. "What about the diplomatic progress?" Ambassador Tony Clark reports that both sides have agreed to the human-mediated territorial settlement. The Keth are giving up the disputed mining worlds, and the Yilan are providing compensation for extraction rights. Both governments have also requested permanent human diplomatic missions to prevent future conflicts. It had become a standard pattern throughout the galaxy. Disputes that had lasted for centuries were being resolved through human arbitration, not because humans were particularly wise or diplomatic, but because both sides knew that rejecting human mediation meant losing access to the systems that kept their civilizations functioning. Dr. Ellen Murphy had returned to infrastructure work, but now as Director of Galactic Engineering Services, a position that gave her authority over major construction projects throughout known space. Her latest project was the complete reconstruction of the Stellar Commonwealth's power networks, using improved human designs. Dr. Murphy, her project coordinator, Engineer Lisa Hayes, approached with the daily progress reports. "The Commonwealth government has approved all of our efficiency modifications. They are also requesting similar upgrades for their industrial facilities on 12 additional worlds." Murphy reviewed the technical specifications with satisfaction. The same species that had questioned human engineering capabilities were now desperately seeking human expertise for every major project. What they had discovered was that human innovation could solve problems that alien civilizations had accepted as permanent limitations for thousands of years. The economic transformation was even more dramatic. Captain Ben Rodriguez, now Director of Galactic Trade Operations, oversaw supply chains that reached every inhabited system in known space. Human merchants operated under new protocols that prioritized efficiency and mutual benefit over the complex regulations that had previously strangled commerce. The quarterly reports show remarkable improvement. His assistant manager Carol Foster noted as she presented the latest data. Overall galactic trade volume is up 300% since we implemented the human commercial standards. Even the species that initially resisted our oversight are seeing dramatic improvements in their economic performance. But the most significant change was not economic or military. It was psychological. Species that had ruled the galaxy for millennia were learning to see humans not as newcomers or junior partners, but as the civilization that made modern galactic society possible. Commander Alex Turner, now heading the Department of Interspecies Relations, met regularly with representatives from across the galaxy. The tone of these meetings was completely different from the condescending dismissal humans had received months earlier. "Commander Turner," the Zephyrian ambassador began, his respectful manner a stark contrast to his previous arrogance, "my government wishes to express continued gratitude for human mediation in our resource dispute with the Trading Consortium. The solution you proposed has increased our extraction efficiency by 50%. Similar expressions of appreciation came regularly from species throughout the galaxy. The hegemony credited human tactical innovations with ending their centuries-long conflict with the Void Hunters. The Commonwealth's infrastructure had been completely revolutionized by human engineering solutions. Even the mysterious synthetic collective had entered into extensive technology-sharing agreements with human research institutions. Not everyone was completely happy with the new arrangement. On the remote world of Haven's Rest, representatives from species that had once held significant power met to discuss their situation. "The humans have made themselves the center of everything," complained former council moderator Zendel. "Every major decision in the galaxy now requires their approval, because every major system in the galaxy depends on their expertise," replied the former ethereal collective representative. "Our withdrawal from negotiations revealed that they had already become the foundation that galactic civilization was built on. We simply had not recognized it." "So what do we do now?" asked the Vorthan delegate. The question remained unanswered because they all understood the truth. There was nothing to do except accept the new reality or face the alternative of returning to the chaos and conflicts that had characterized the galaxy before human involvement back on Terra Station. Admiral Morrison reviewed the latest reports with a mixture of satisfaction and responsibility. The transformation of galactic civilization was proceeding smoothly, but he understood that true long-term stability required more than just human dominance. "The key," he explained to his senior staff, "is ensuring that every species benefits from the new system. We did not set out to conquer the galaxy. We set out to earn respect. Now that we have it, we need to prove that we deserve it." Ambassador Carter nodded in agreement. "The stability reports are very encouraging. Conflicts are down 90% galaxy-wide. Trade efficiency continues to improve. Most importantly, we are seeing the development of what our sociologists are calling a truly unified galactic civilization. One with humans as the guiding force," Morrison observed. "One with humans as the stabilizing foundation," Carter corrected. "There is an important difference. We are not ruling through fear or oppression. We are leading through competence and reliability." As they spoke, another delegation ship docked at Terra Station, this one carrying hegemony representatives seeking human assistance with a complex terraforming project. It was a scene that happened dozens of times each day as species from across the galaxy came to request human expertise, mediation, or support. The civilizations that had once dismissed humanity as too young and emotional to participate in galactic affairs had learned a crucial lesson. In a galaxy full of ancient species set in their traditional ways, sometimes what you need most is the fresh perspective and innovative solutions that only a young, adaptable civilization can provide. Humanity had not conquered the galaxy through military might or economic domination. They had earned their position through demonstrated capability, proving that they could solve problems that others had given up on, maintain peace where others had failed, and create prosperity where others saw only limitations. Admiral Morrison watched the steady flow of galactic traffic around Terra Station and reflected on how dramatically everything had changed since that day when he walked out of the peace talks. They had demanded respect and been ignored. They had withdrawn their cooperation and been dismissed. But in the end, they had achieved something far greater than what they had originally sought. They had not just gained a seat at the table of galactic civilization. They had become the table itself, the foundation that supported everything else. The species that had taught them that galactic politics was about power rather than fairness had learned their lesson well. Humanity had demonstrated that the greatest power in the universe was not the ability to destroy or conquer, but the ability to become so essential that others could not imagine functioning without you. As reports continued to arrive of successful projects, resolved conflicts, and grateful alien governments, it became clear that humanity's dramatic walkout had not just changed the terms of negotiation, it had changed the galaxy forever, creating a new order where human leadership was not just accepted but desperately needed by everyone else. The age of human dominance had not been won through war or intimidation. It had been earned through the simple demonstration that in a complex, interconnected universe, the species that keeps everything running smoothly is the species that ultimately holds all the real power.